This is a GRDC podcast.
Hello, I'm Sally Maguire. The Grain Storage Extension project is a GRDC investment, and I'm here with Ben White from the Grain Storage Extension team to talk about fertiliser storage do's and don'ts. Now, Ben, tell us, why are we having this conversation in the first place?
I think we're having this conversation, Sally, because there's been some horror stories this year just gone past with fertiliser stuck in silos. We've seen, obviously destruction of those silos. We've seen loss of fertiliser and potential safety issues as well. So, worth having a chat and making sure that we can probably get around some of those problems in future years, or at least be prepared.
Okay, so let's start with the good part. What are the do's? What are some of the things that growers should be doing?
Well, I think what we can do is make sure that, if we are ordering fertiliser, we order it in advance. We're not in a rush. We're not taking it from suppliers that are, potentially not going to provide us with, a product that's maybe not quite as good a quality, should we say. So we want to find a product that's from a reputable supplier that we know is going to be good quality, that isn't going to have too many fines in it. At the end of the day, whatever comes in the ship is what comes in the ship. So I guess if we can work with suppliers that order from reputable sources, we end up with better quality product, and that will help us a lot in terms of that storage.
Okay, so as the season progresses then, what are some of the storage do's?
Well, I think if you do have fertiliser coming in, you're going to put it in storage, just don't have it there for long, bring it in as you need to. If you do bring it into a shed, for example, then you want to make sure that it's protected, make sure it's not terribly exposed to the elements. If there's a chance of that, it's an open shed, cover it with a tarp, make sure that we're just minimising its potential exposure to moisture, which is where we get a lot of the issues.
So let's turn to some of the don'ts. What are some of the things that you've seen that should not be happening?
Oh, look, I think excessive handling, and that can really give us some issues where we're handling the material a lot, where potentially putting it through augers that can break it down. So if we do need to shift it, a conveyor is the best method. If we're bringing fert in from outside in a truck, try and tip it up, put it in the shed, store it wherever it's got to go without having to handle it. That's fantastic. If it does need to be shifted, use a belt conveyor. I suppose the other thing is, if there are options there. If the product has a lot of dust and a lot of fines, that can be problematic. So it precludes us from using, some of the coatings that can help prevent that from happening. So if that dust is already there, we put the coatings on, we can end up with lumps. So, I suppose getting rid of those lumps and handling some of those lumps, can screen the product as it goes in to the, whatever it might be, the 5-in-1 bin or wherever we're using it. I guess trying to minimise those lumps in the first place is really where we should be aiming.
In terms of products that people are storing, what do they need to be careful of there?
Oh, look, in terms of the type of product they're storing, blends are something that are particularly, prone to problems. We might have issues where we've got, say, a blended fertiliser product. We might have particular issues around, the moisture ingress that might occur with that particular product. So blended products, be particularly careful with, and we don't want to store those very long at all. So if you've got a blended product coming on farm, make sure it's turned around and spread relatively quickly. Okay,
so a lot of this stuff is easy stuff. Why do you think that sometimes it gets overlooked?
Oh, look, I think in a lot of cases, we may not have the option, or we may not be able to order some of that fertiliser product early in the piece. We may not know what we need, So in a lot of cases where it's a little bit hand to mouth, so we're trying to get product in, we're trying to store it. We might get a bit of product in, we can't use it straight away because the conditions aren't right, or we haven't got the rain on the horizon that warrants getting out and spreading product. So I think there's some of the challenges that we have in terms of the timing, I guess, around product use. That means that it sits in the shed, and that's when we can get some issues. If it's in a silo, for example, that's when we can really have trouble, and that's what we've seen this year, Sally, where we've had material stuck up in silos that aren't really designed for fertiliser storage. And that probably triggers some safety concerns that, as well as the loss of product and the loss potentially of the infrastructure that's there. And we might have some issues with safety, and we want to make sure everyone's safe around working around the farm and minimise any potential risks that might be there.
Okay, so just to expand on that, what are the potential consequences if you're not doing it correctly?
Oh, look, and people might have seen on social media some of the videos where we've got product hanging up in silos, people trying to get it out with air, with sticks, all sorts of stuff. That's a real no-no. Don't get in underneath the silo. Having that product hung in the silo is really dangerous, and it can lead to the silo being imbalance. It can lead to tipping over, all of a sudden letting go of product, and potentially causing issues there as well. And we just don't want people around that. So from a safety perspective, well away from that. There are certain silos that are specifically built for fertiliser. They've typically got an internal coating, and they've got a really steep cone that helps the product flow out. So I guess if we are going to store it in silos, that's where it goes. Otherwise, if you read your receipt or your docket that comes with the fertiliser, it will typically say don't store in silos. So yeah, probably something to think about. Just be I guess prepared and have a plan for if that fert is coming on farm. Make sure you know where it's going to go and you've got a plan for it.
Okay, so on that, is there any kind of step-by-step guide or anything that you would encourage growers to do at a certain time in the season just to get ahead of this?
Oh, look, that pre-preparation, as we mentioned, is essential. Pre-ordering is something that particularly growers in the west can do. It's not as easy in the east sometimes to get those pre-orders in. So I guess that preparation and planning is great if you can do it. And then of course how much product you've got coming in, where you can store it, probably when you're going to use it. Yeah, that's probably some of the stuff that we need to probably work a little bit on and make sure that growers are at the forefront of that preparation side of things, yeah.
Okay, and so the Grain Storage Extension team's got plenty of resources. Where can people go to get information?
Well, actually GRDC have a fantastic resource online. It talks about fertiliser storage and talks about the options that are available and the benefits and disadvantages of each, as well as some case studies. So if people head to the GRDC website and look for fertiliser storage, that resource will pop up to the top of the list, and it's definitely one worth having a read of. And it probably highlights some of the options that people may not have thought about when it comes to fertiliser storage.
Okay, great. Ben White, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure as always.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
And more information on the podcast can be found in the show notes, and those links that Ben mentioned will all be in there too. This has been a GRDC podcast. Thanks for listening.